Ever wonder how scientists can study human cells without needing a volunteer every single time?
It's pretty fascinating, really.
Yeah, it all comes down to these things called immortal cell lines.
They just keep on reproducing, basically, outside the body.
Exactly. And today we're going to dive deep into the most famous one of all, HeLa cells.
Ah, yes, the HeLa cells.
Named after Henrietta Lacks, they've been absolutely crucial to all kinds of medical research. But you know what?
What's that?
Most people have never even heard of her.
Yeah, that's right. Henrietta's story is, it's pretty incredible and not really well known.
Right, so that's what we're hoping to uncover in this deep dive.
Yeah.
So we're using excerpts from the immortal life of Henrietta Lacks to really understand this remarkable woman and the huge legacy of her cells.
This book goes into some really important stuff.
Yeah.
Especially considering, like, what they knew back then about ethics and how much credit people got for their contributions to research.
For sure, it's a different world now, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But okay, let's try to picture Henrietta's world. Okay. It's the late 1940s, and she's this young woman, vibrant and stylish, a loving mother of 5.
Yeah.
There's even this iconic photo of her smiling so radiantly, totally unaware of the tumor growing inside her.
And that photo's been published, like, everywhere, right?
Oh, yeah. Countless times. And they don't even mention her name half the time.
It's just mind-blowing when you think about it.
It's truly heartbreaking to think about how her life was cut short by cervical cancer.
Yeah, way too young.
Before she even turned 31.
And to make matters worse, during surgery,
Oh, yeah.
they took a sample of her tumor.
Without even asking.
Without her knowing, without her consent.
And this is the sample that became the source of the HeLa cell line.
The very first immortal human cell line.
Ever created. It's hard to believe something so monumental came from such a difficult time.
I know what you mean.
Scientists had been trying so hard to grow human cells in the lab, but they kept dying.
Right.
What was it about Henrietta's cells that made them different?
Well, they were unique for sure. Her cells doubled, like, every single day.
Oh, 24 hours. Wow.
And get this, they never stopped dividing.
They just kept going.
Scientists finally had, like, a stable population of human cells to work with.
If you could pile up all the HeLa cells ever grown,
Yeah.
they'd weigh more than 50 million metric tons.
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
And if you laid them all out end to end,
Yeah.
they would wrap around the Earth at least 3 times.
Oh, my gosh.
It's incredible to think that all of that came from one woman.
And the crazy part is,
What?
Henrietta didn't know any of this was happening.
Right, she had no clue.
And even worse, her family wasn't told about the HeLa cell line for decades.
It's wild to think about that.
Imagine finding out that your mother's cells are alive and well,
Out there in the world.
in labs all over the globe, while your own family struggles to even see a doctor.
The book asks this really powerful question.
What's that?
It says, if our mother's cells done so much for medicine, how come our family can't afford to see no doctors?
That's heavy.
It's a tough one.
It really makes you think about informed consent
Absolutely.
and the control that individuals should have over their own biological material.
Yeah, I mean, who owns those cells, right?
It's a huge question,
Yeah.
especially now with all the advances in science.
Really makes you think.
Yeah, big time.
It's definitely a story that makes you think about, how progress can sometimes come at a cost.
Yeah, definitely.
But let's shift gears a bit and maybe dive into the science a little bit more.
Yeah, sure.
Like, what made Henrietta's cells so remarkable? What was so different about them?
Well, before HeLa cells came along, scientists were having a really hard time studying human biology in the lab.
Yeah.
I mean, they often had to rely on animal models,
Right.
but those didn't always, accurately reflect how human cells would behave.
So I guess having these cells that could actually thrive in a lab setting,
Yeah.
that must have been like a game changer for them.
Oh, absolutely. It's just like suddenly they had this window into the human body.
No.
HeLa cells allowed scientists to actually, observe cellular processes in real time.
Wow.
They could test different drugs and therapies.
Yeah.
And they could start to understand how diseases actually work at a cellular level.
I remember reading in the book about how they even used HeLa cells to study the effects of radiation and toxins.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It's a little bit, I don't know, creepy,
Yeah.
but also crucial for understanding the impact of those things on human health.
For sure. For sure. I mean, they exposed them to radiation to see what the damage from the atomic bomb was like.
Wow.
They even sent them into space.
You're kidding.
No, in the early days of the space program,
Yeah.
scientists wanted to see how human cells would react to zero gravity,
Right.
which, they needed to know that for long-duration missions.
It's just amazing to think that these tiny little cells taken from one woman
Yeah.
ended up playing a role in such huge research.
That's the crazy thing about this whole story.
What other kinds of research were they used for?
Oh, man, the list is practically endless.
Like what?
Well, for one, they've been used in developing chemo drugs
Oh, wow.
and understanding how cancer cells work, in general.
Yeah.
They've also been used in cloning,
Really?
which is creating, genetically identical copies of a cell,
Mm.
and then gene mapping,
Okay.
which helps us figure out where genes are located on DNA and what they do.
So basically, HeLa cells have been a driving force in a whole bunch of scientific discovery.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But, going back to the book for a second,
Yeah.
one of the things that I think makes the immortal life of Henrietta Lacks so captivating
Mhm.
is how the author, Rebecca Skloot, weaves together the science
Yeah,
with this human story
right.
of Henrietta and her family.
I think she did a brilliant job with that.
It's like scientific storytelling at its best.
It would have been easy to just focus on all the scientific breakthroughs.
Right, just the facts.
Exactly. But she took the time to actually learn about Henrietta's life,
Yeah.
her personality, her struggles, her dreams.
It's what makes the book so interesting to read.
Absolutely.
And I think it really brings those ethical questions about using human tissues in research.
Right to the forefront.
Right into focus, especially considering that when they took Henrietta's cells,
Yeah.
informed consent wasn't even really a thing.
Things were definitely different back then.
Yeah, the ethical guidelines around tissue sampling and cell culture.
They were still evolving,
It's wild to think that her cells were taken without her knowledge or consent, and then her family was kept in the dark about the whole HeLa cell line for years.
Yeah, it makes you think about how important patient autonomy is.
Yeah, definitely.
And whether people should actually have ownership rights.
Over their own tissue.
Yeah, over their own biological material.
That's a tough one.
I know, it really makes you wonder how things might have been different.
Totally.
If informed consent had been the norm back then.
And the book does such a good job of presenting the Lacks family's point of view.
It does, it really does.
Skloot gives them a voice, lets them share their feelings about it all.
And it's complicated, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, there's the pride.
That their mother contributed to something so important.
Yeah, but then there's the anger and frustration.
At being left out of the loop.
And the fact that they never saw any of the financial benefits.
It's like a powerful reminder that behind every scientific discovery, there are these human stories.
It's not just about the science.
Yeah, it's about real people.
People with families and their own experiences.
And they deserve to be acknowledged.
Absolutely. And respected.
That contrast is just so stark,
It is.
Here's a family who couldn't afford health care.
Yeah.
While her cells are becoming this, invaluable tool for research.
And making money for companies.
But not for them.
It's pretty messed up.
It makes you think about the whole commercialization of biological materials.
It's a complicated issue for sure.
Really complicated.
There are no easy answers.
But Henrietta's story definitely forces us to at least think about it.
Right. And try to do better.
Especially now with all the advances in biotechnology.
I mean, personalized medicine, yeah.
It's like a cautionary tale
It is.
telling us to move forward carefully
Yeah.
and always keep the ethics in mind.
At the forefront, exactly.
But let's shift focus a little bit to Deborah Lacks,
Okay.
who is Henrietta's daughter.
Yeah.
The book really focuses on her journey to understand her mother's legacy.
It's an incredible story.
What can we learn from her about the human impact of all this research?
Deborah's story is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
She grew up not knowing anything about her mother's cells
Or their impact.
or how they changed the world.
Right.
It wasn't until she was an adult that she started putting the pieces together
Wow.
about HeLa and the woman behind them.
I can only imagine uncovering all of that must have been so emotional for her.
Oh, absolutely. Try to imagine trying to process all that information.
Yeah.
Your mother's cells are alive and
But
well,
there in the world.
contributing to all these amazing scientific discoveries.
Well, also dealing with the fact that she died so young
Yeah.
without anyone knowing her name.
And her family never benefited from her contribution.
It's a lot to take in.
It's a lot.
What do you think made Deborah want to find answers and share her family's story?
I think it was a few things.
Yeah.
I think she wanted to understand who her mother was as a person.
Beyond just being the source of these cells.
Right, not just HeLa, but Henrietta.
Yeah.
She wanted to honor her memory
Yeah.
and make sure people knew the real story.
The accurate story.
Yeah, and I think she also wanted to bring attention to the ethical issues.
Yeah.
Make sure that something like this wouldn't happen again.
That's so important.
It really shows that scientific progress isn't just about data and discoveries.
Right. It's about people.
Real people with families and stories.
Who deserve our respect.
Absolutely, and we need to remember that.
Deborah's determination to understand her mother's legacy.
It's inspiring.
It speaks to the power of that human connection.
It does.
It's like, we need to give a voice to those who've been ignored or overlooked.
Especially in the pursuit of science.
Yeah, it's a story that really sticks with you.
It does.
Long after you finish the book.
I know what you mean.
Makes you question your assumptions.
And reevaluate priorities.
And really think about the role of science in society.
Yeah, and the responsibility that comes with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really makes you think about the people behind all these big scientific advances.
It does.
And it brings up these ethical questions that we're still dealing with today, like
Totally.
how do we balance the good that can come from research
Yeah.
with people's rights and their privacy?
It's tricky.
It feels like we're still trying to figure that out.
I think we are. Things have come a long way since the 50s.
For sure.
But there are definitely still some gray areas when it comes to using human tissues and cells.
Oh, absolutely. And, even when you do have informed consent,
Right.
it can still be complicated. Yeah. Like the book talks about how Henrietta's family, they really struggled to understand the science behind it all.
Even with people trying to explain it to them.
Yeah, they felt like they were left out of the loop for way too long.
And then you have the whole question of ownership.
Right. Like who owns those cells?
Do people have rights to their own biological material?
Even after it's been taken from their bodies.
Exactly. And what if someone uses that material to develop something that makes a ton of money?
Should the person it came from get a share of that?
It's tough.
These are hard questions.
There's no easy answers.
But Henrietta's story makes us think about them.
It does.
And it reminds us that progress shouldn't come at the expense of people's rights or dignity.
Exactly.
We have to make sure that research is done ethically
and transparently.
with respect for everyone involved.
Absolutely.
Before we wrap up, though, I want to bring it back to Henrietta Lacks herself.
Okay.
I feel like we've talked so much about our cells.
Yeah.
But what about her as a person?
What do we know about her?
What can we learn from the book about who she was?
Well, the book paints this picture of her as a really vibrant woman.
Yeah.
Someone full of life and really caring.
Like a real person.
She was a devoted mother.
Yeah.
Loved to dress up, loved to have fun.
Yeah, and she just really enjoyed life, even though it wasn't always easy for her.
It's easy to forget about that side of things.
Oh, totally.
We get caught up in the science.
Right.
And we forget that behind those famous cells,
Was a human being
a mother, a wife, a daughter.
with a family and a whole life of her own.
The book does a great job of reminding us that Henrietta was so much more than just a source of cells.
And I think it's through her family
Especially Deborah.
that we really get a sense of who she was.
Deborah's drive to learn about her mother
Yeah, to understand her story,
and to make sure she was remembered as a person.
not just as cells.
It's incredibly powerful.
It really just drives home that point that behind every big scientific discovery,
There are real people.
with their own stories.
Yeah. Stories of resilience, of sacrifice.
And sometimes, like we saw with Henrietta,
Yeah.
a sense of injustice.
It's a reminder that we have to do better.
And Henrietta's story is such a powerful example of that.
It really makes you think about how we can make sure research is done the right way
Ethically, with respect for everyone involved.
so that everyone benefits.
Well, we've come to the end of our deep dive into the immortal life of Henrietta Lacks.
It's been quite a journey.
What are your thoughts now?
Yeah, what do you think about using human cells in research after learning about Henrietta's story?
And how do you think we can best honor her legacy?
And the legacy of all those who've contributed to scientific progress
These are definitely questions worth thinking about.
as we keep pushing the boundaries of science and medicine.
And that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.